Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is the Fedora Podcast, and I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks. And joining me is Mr. Noah Chalaya.
Hi there, sir. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. It's the holiday season. I had my first bit of pumpkin pie the
No,
other
no,
day.
no, no. Stop,
Life
stop.
is
No,
good.
no, no. Hey, stop. Hold on. This is a character thing for me, Eric. Are you a Christmas like all day, every day, all year round, or does Christmas come after Thanksgiving? We're in Thanksgiving season, not Christmas season. This is Thanksgiving season. Christmas season comes after Thanksgiving season. Christmas, the red and the greens, yes, right? Snow. Right now, we're in brown. It's Thanksgiving. They're two separate things. So first we're thankful, then we'll get to the Christmas.
Yes, I completely agree. And in fact, I'm very, very adamant about this. I should probably start like rage posting on Twitter or something because that's
No.
what you do nowadays.
No.
Christmas music does not play in this house until the day before Thanksgiving.
My man.
Why? Because that's when you
Because it's not Christmas season.
Exactly.
It's Thanksgiving season. We'll get to Christmas season at Christmas time, the day after Thanksgiving. Right now, the tree sits inside of the box, the tree thing, and that sits on the shelf in the garage until Christmas season.
Yes, totally
This
agree.
is a true story. Then I promise we'll be done with Christmas season. So my kid goes to their piano lesson, and my wife there's a kid that's babysitting the piano teacher's kid, and they get into this conversation in which the kid says, yeah, my parents believe it became a thing, right? Which parents do Christmas all year, or like, basically as soon as July's over, it's like 4th of July, yay, Christmas season. And which ones wait until Christmas season? So it's going to go to the next generation.
No, those parents should not be allowed to reproduce.
Keep Christmas with you. Okay, all right, I'm done.
So,
Fedora 41.
This is not an episode about holiday traditions. This is actually an episode about some pretty big news, which we can all be thankful for. See what I did there? So just a couple of weeks ago, Fedora Linux 41 came out, and I wish I could say this was a funny coincidence, but we actually planned this, that Fedora Linux 41 would be reviewed on Fedora Podcast 41. See, we're yeah.
You're firing on all cylinders today, Eric. Like a steel trap, I see.
Well, it's not my fault that my co-host likes to derail me. I mean, like wearing a blue fedora his first time on the show. So, not gonna cast any blame, Noah July. So, if you haven't yet, go ahead and upgrade to Fedora Linux 41. There's a lot of amazing features which we are going to talk about today. So, Noah, you want to kick us off?
All right. So for the nerds in the room, we start out with kernel 6.11. There's a very detailed, let's see if I can find it here. There's a very detailed list of all of the change set. We can post that in the Fedora Podcast matrix room, which if you're saying to yourself, hold on a second, the what? The Fedora Podcast. So it's just #podcast:fedoraproject.org. And you can join the matrix room. And then even if you're listening to this in the after times, you can go back and say, I'm a nerd. I too wish to read the change set. It's there for you. It's also available at fedoraproject.org.
If you're watching the video, you can actually join us on Matrix using the QR code in the corner. Or if you're catching this after the fact or listening to the audio version, check the show notes. Sorry, I had to sneak that in.
That's fancy. The little thing, you just hold your phone right there at the top of the screen. It just takes you right there to the chat room. So, okay, backstory. I've spent the last 5 years of my life on KDE. And I really thought I would never go back to GNOME. Problem is, my wife she loves GNOME. And so the situation I find myself in, Eric, is that I spent a bunch of time trying to rebuild a GNOME-like experience on KDE for my wife, and I hate losing grounds, and I don't really want to go back, but I keep getting drawn in. And so in Fedora 41, we get the new, is it Ptyxis? We've changed the terminal app. That's what I'm trying to. Ptyxis. Wow,
I'm assuming the P is silent, but maybe it's Ptyxis. I don't know.
It's a terminal app. It's pretty good.
Honestly, I haven't used it yet.
Open it right now. Do you have it running?
So
See, hold on.
I'm just such a basic user. You talk about KDE versus GNOME. I came to Linux full time, certain number of years ago, and I landed on GNOME because it was very similar to the experience I was used to, which was macOS. And so GNOME macOS felt very, very similar. It was easy to get up and get running, and then so from there, I've tried KDE a few times. I ran it full time, just for a couple of months, and I got to say, last episode, sorry, not last episode, 2 episodes ago, episode 39, we had Neil Gampa on the show, and we talked about the new release of KDE Plasma. It's tempting, but to your question, I have a solution for you.
Well, hold on a second. I'm still hung up on. You said you're a basic Linux user? Eric, do you not open up the terminal on your Linux distro?
I do, but
okay.
It's still GNOME terminal, and trying to switch. I don't know. This old dog may not be able to learn any new tricks.
The GNOME terminal rolls off, as is pointed out in our chat room, rolls off the tongue a little bit better than Ptyxis.
Maybe it's Ptyxis. I don't know. I give up. Oh goodness.
Well, let me ask you this: what is your basic role for your Fedora workstation?
So
daily driver is it?
I tend to have very, very few systems that do all the things. So I've got a work issued MacBook, and then I've got a daily driver that is happily running GNOME Fedora Linux 41. And so because I don't know which device I'll have with me, let's be honest, it's usually mine, a Lenovo. A lot of times it's just whatever I've got handy. And so for the most part, all of my work I can do through Google Workspace. A lot of the work that I do here at Red Hat, I'm writing documentation, I'm writing blogs, and our primary tool is G Suite. So that works fine no matter what distribution or what operating system you're using. I have found that the production experience, I know this is going to blow people's minds, on Linux is actually a bit better than on my MacBook, because I use tools like Audacity, I use tools like Kdenlive, and those work much better on the native Linux. So, and then thanks to Fedora Proton, which we talked about last episode, or not Fedora Proton, but Proton on Steam, my Fedora box is actually also my gaming rig. So I've got a lot of I get a lot of mileage out of any device that I use.
So just going off the production value, so what I'm hearing you say is at least one of the roles for your Fedora workstation is you're using it in production. Is that, or for doing audio video production? Is that
correct?
Accurate. Okay. So one of the things is MIPI. Are you familiar with MIPI? MIPI?
I've heard of it. I can't recall it off the top of my head.
Okay. So inside of laptops, let's say you don't have a super fancy HDMI capture system or some fancy camera that, it gets in on a nice tripod and all the things. And it's just, I got the webcam that's built into my laptops. It is probably connected with this MIPI interface. And so previously it was a real pain to get these things working. Now they have support for what they call Intel IPU6 attached MIPI cameras.
So I'm kind of an idiot because I'm the one who put MIPI backed cameras into the episode guide. So yes, I do know what you're talking about.
Oh, good. Great. Awesome. You read your own show notes. That's great. Yes. Okay.
So let me tell you what I'm really excited about with this addition of MIPI backed cameras. One of the things I'm really excited about, and this is kind of in conjunction with Firefox, is the fact that like on my webcam, my external webcam, I've got a little indicator light that lets me know that camera is active. So I mean that tells me don't stuff food in my mouth or don't pick my nose because the camera's on. And so now with support from Firefox, Pipewire, and this MIPI backed cameras, you can actually get that in your notification bar in the corner for on GNOME. So it makes it really nice to be able to just look up in the corner and go, nope, my camera's not active, so I can walk away, or it is active, so I need to be professional, or something along those lines. Which sadly, it's been a very quiet couple of weeks. I haven't had very many meetings. Don't tell my boss. She'll schedule a whole bunch more for me.
So if you're looking for a daily driving machine, if it was going to be your everyday computer, if it was going to replace your MacBook, would Fedora fit the bill?
Oh, no question. Never has Linux been easier. I mean, just look at the release.
Can you install it on your MacBook?
You can.
We do it
I'm
right
not that
now?
crazy though. No, I will not do it right now.
Why? I think they have a script, Eric. No, IT, you don't need IT support. They have a script. You can just paste it into your terminal, I think.
I think you're right. Oh goodness.
What generation is it?
It's one of the M2s, in fact. But
yeah, here you go. Just paste this into your. Can you do me a favor? Can you paste this into the terminal on your MacBook? Curl Fedora. This is really great. Fedora-remix.org/install. Pipe that to sh. This is simple. This is easy. We can totally do this. Then you could use it as your daily driver.
This is true. I mean, my M2 using Fedora Linux would be fantastic, but I'm very happy with my X1.
Let's do it.
Absolutely not. Oh.
Okay. All right.
Look, inevitably someone like Neil or you or someone will convince me to do some crazy thing to my very stable, very reliant X1 running Fedora Linux that I've done in-place upgrades on for like the last 4 years, and I'll break something, and I'd rather have something stable and solid.
Didn't you tell me 5 minutes ago that that the media production on Fedora was working better than your MacBook?
So it does in fact.
Paste that one line of code into the MacBook, but Fedora on your MacBook, and then you'll get those benefits on the computer you already have.
This is fair, but I'm going to have to call security in Grand Forks and have you escorted out of the building.
For suggesting that you install Fedora on your laptop as we review Fedora 41 on the Fedora Podcast?
I have multiple machines, sir. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. All right. So one of the other things is the ability from these third-party repositories to install the Nvidia graphics card. So the laptop that I tested this on has a dedicated graphics card attached to it. And it has this irritating problem where if you don't have the Nvidia graphics card, even if forget playing games, forget doing all the graphic intensive stuff, not calculating AI, I just want my laptop to go to suspend. And I can't do that because by out of the box, the out of box experience is going to be close the laptop and it will just, something shut up, but other things do not. And if you install the Nvidia graphics card, works like a dream every time. They make it super easy to go out to that third-party repository. They won't ship it by default, right? So we won't include proprietary code in the thing that we give you. So if you just plug the flash drive into your computer and install it and expect pure free Linux goodness to flow out, that will happen. But if you're one of the people that say to yourself, I prefer to leverage all of the advantages of this piece of hardware, Fedora makes it really easy to enable that third-party repository. It goes out to the interwebs, finds the nerds that packaged it for you, installs it onto your computer, and then provides you the driver so you have a silky smooth NVIDIA-like experience to the extent that open source guys can make NVIDIA a silky smooth experience. I
mean, there's a simple solution. Run Team Red, run AMD.
Yeah, no problem. I tell you what, I'm gonna go grab my screwdriver kit. Can you walk me through pulling the Nvidia graphics card out of my laptop, and we'll swap it for a Team Red one?
I would love to, but I know some. You just put your screen to sleep.
No, I minimized the white window. Hold on a second. I need the white window back so that I have my light. It's my blue
We're
background.
high tech and professional on the Fedora podcast. Let me tell you, I don't even
I'm-
read my own show notes, and Noah's key light is a white window.
It's my Fedora computer. Come on now. Make fun of my Fedora
But
computer.
if you would like to work on your laptop, Noah, I do have a great suggestion for you.
Hmm.
Framework laptops.
Okay, what do you like about the framework?
That I can part it out, that I can do my own maintenance on it, that I can go out to their website and tell them that I want this CPU, this GPU, this amount of RAM, throw all that in a box, throw in a chassis, mail it to me, and I'll assemble it myself. That, if any of you are looking for Christmas ideas for the IT guy, new framework laptop would be fantastic.
What do you have now, other than the
Just
MacBook?
X1.
X1 Carbon.
Carbon.
What generation?
Yes.
Where's the power button? Is it on the on the top or on the side?
It's on the top.
Okay. 6th gen. What do you like about the framework that you can't do with your ThinkPad? Just down the rabbit hole.
We're doing great. So, I mean, one of the things I like about framework, I don't own one yet, but full disclosure, but I literally am pricing them out and trying to work it into the 2025 budget. Just the fact that I can buy a chassis and run it for years, and then I can pull out hard drives and put in.
How long have you had your ThinkPad?
So I'm coming up on 5 years at Red Hat, so just shy of 5.
So, have you outgrown it?
No, it works great. Actually, it'd probably become my wife's laptop at some point.
I guess I just don't love. So if the ThinkPad has so far outlived it sounds like it's still the tool doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you want a framework?
Because it's new and it's shiny, and I can switch out parts.
Here's the thing. I would tell you, but really though, I love what framework is doing. Don't get me wrong. I think one of the greatest things about framework is precisely that we can stop the cycle of, hey, the new shiny thing came out, so we got to go get the thing. The other thing still does the thing, but we got to go get the new thing because it just came out. The thing that is I think the thing that is exciting about framework is that you buy it one time and then we don't ever have to upgrade or do it again. So I would tell you, I too would be excited to buy a framework, but in the interest of trying to use technology to its full potential until it no longer serves the purpose anymore, run your ThinkPad into the ground, then go buy a framework. Does that seem logical?
Logically, yes, but I reject your statement.
I want the new thing. I can relate. But, I mean, you can.
No, I'm right there with you. I mean, for years, I was within a month of release, I was out getting the new iPhone, for instance. But up until this past year, I had my last iPhone for about 4 years, and it worked great. And then my iPhone.
How much was your iPhone?
Oh gosh, let's not even go there. My previous iPhone.
$1,000 for a phone that you can't change the battery in, and used it for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
$1,000 in 4 years. That's $250 a year.
Mm-hmm. Although when you think about it, when it's the number one device that I use pretty much anywhere for anything. I mean, in the car, on the go, at the airport. I mean, $250 a year is not too bad, but you're absolutely right. My previous iPhone decided that it didn't want to hold a charge anymore.
So it's a consumable item for you, though. It's a thing that it's not so much it's a thing I want to buy. I want to buy a widget and have a widget. It's a consumable. It's a fee you pay, in this case to Apple, for the privilege of using their technical infrastructure on a device for which they will support for a time period which they will determine and a price for which they will determine. And then you just split that out and say, okay, I'm in the club. I've got the
it's the cost of being in IT. It's the cost of being a technologist. It's the cost of wanting to stay on the leading edge.
No,
I'm very particular. I've got a 1-year-old iPhone, but I'm running a Dell PowerEdge 720 in my server rack. So I'm very fickle about things, and I'm not sure how we got down this rabbit hole.
Fair enough. Framework. I think I think it will do great things for our society if we can learn to be content with what we have. And then when they outgrow the things, we can fix them and put the new things in so they can do all the new doohickeys and thingamajigs.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks. That's the end of our show.
Thank you.
So we've been talking about new and shiny things, but actually that very well dovetails into our next point. Fedora Linux 41 comes with GNOME 47. And what I love about this conversation is when I got into the Linux desktop space over a decade ago and started attending user groups and running Linux on laptops full time, every release could be a catastrophe. Every release had some major thing that was getting ripped out. Every major release had something that could likely go wrong. But if you look at GNOME 47, they swapped out the default terminal. The GNOME Foundation also did what I think is a beautiful yet subtle facelift. Things like accent colors on Windows, things like slightly redesigned dialog windows, and strangely enough, support for smaller resolution screens. We keep thinking bigger is better, but GNOME took time to improve smaller screen resolution. And so when you think about these things, that is a very iterative, it's a very quality of life type update. There's not that much that has changed. And I say it's subtle because the accent colors on Windows now I think they look fantastic, especially with Fedora Blue. But I mean, it's just we've reached a point in the Fedora Linux desktop where not every release do you have to recompile all these drivers, and Lord knows I remember the days when you had to get the adapter so you could plug in an Ethernet cord so you could download the new drivers for your Wi-Fi adapter because Wi-Fi decided to stop working because you upgraded. We're not there anymore. And that, I mean, we joked and we beat around the bush for a bit, but my X1 Carbon, despite its age, can do just fine for what I use it for over my MacBook.
So do you think that we're maybe at a point, not just in Fedora, but in desktop Linux land, where quality of life improvements aren't just welcome, but they're massively overdue? How many people have you talked to? And I think if you're honest with yourself, you would, like, this might play into why there's a MacBook running macOS sitting in front of your face for your work computer, is there are rough edges on almost everything. And that's true of macOS and that's true of Windows, but it's also true on the Linux desktop environment. And it is really aggravating for when you have, when you rely on that tool to do your thing, right? And so when you get fragmentation of community and you get like, well, these people are working on the KDE problems and those people are working on the GNOME problems and then these people are working on the Deepin problems and those people, and you get all these different people, which is great. Competition of ideas is excellent. I think it's awesome. The problem with it is, or the natural consequence, maybe it isn't even a problem. Maybe it's just the natural consequence of doing it that way is you get all of the problems solved in a bunch of different ways all over the place, but inconsistently. And so one of the things that's been really nice, Canonical gave up on doing their own desktop environment and got on the GNOME train. Fedora was always on the GNOME train. All these places were always kind of on the GNOME train, and everybody maintains a spin. So if you have a desktop preference, that competition of ideas is still available to you, to include new options like the Atomic distros, where they come down as an image and you can run them and all the goodness that. So that plethora of open source ideas all kind of comes together and is available to you on Fedora and frankly most other distros. But when we say there's quality of life things coming down the GNOME track and landing in the default desktop environment for the probably largest desktop distribution inside of the United States, that's a big deal. It's cool that we're finally getting to the things where we're like, no, let's get the little notifications in the windows to look really, really good and not cover up, for example, the last file name that you're trying to select inside of the file browser. It's really annoying. We live with those things. And again, I would tell you you're delusional if you're like, well, I just never have problems on macOS or I never have problems on Windows. Neither of those two things are true. Everybody has bones that are buried. But I think when we fix them in the open source world, then they get fixed for everybody, and then all the ships rise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And the Fedora ecosystem itself is a great example of that. Like you mentioned, spins. We've got several Fedora editions between GNOME, KDE's in the process of being promoted from a spin to one of the editions, one of the premier desktop environments on Fedora. And then we've got other spins where you've got the Cinnamons, you've got the I think Mate's still out there. You've got all these other choices, and what's nice is when something's fixed in underlying Fedora, it's fixed for all those different desktop environments. So if you've got an issue with the kernel, for instance, it's gonna mess up no matter what no matter what desktop environment you're running. But I mean, working for Red Hat or not, Fedora would be my distribution of choice, and I
Why?
think
No,
why?
but really, I mean, out of all the distributions you could choose, why Fedora?
Okay, great question. So, and I can answer this from a larger perspective too. You're talking about Windows versus Mac versus Linux all having their issues. What I have found with Linux is my knowledge of the command line, having been a Linux systems administrator, I'm comfortable enough making corrections on the command line. So things that I can run a bash script, things that I can run a few commands. More often than not nowadays, it's Ansible playbooks that I can just run this thing and fix a problem. And my thought is, as my kids get older, they're going to want laptops as well. And so I can apply my systems administrator knowledge to my small fleet of systems that we'll have over the next couple of years and push out updates, fix bugs. So it's not a question of, well, my operating system of choice doesn't have any issues. You're deceiving yourself. Mac, Windows, a lot of them in Windows, Linux, it doesn't matter. They've all got their issues. It's a question of which issues can I live with? What compromises am I willing to make versus what hills do I intend to die on? Um, and that's very true for Fedora as well. I came into the Fedora ecosystem because a lot of companies I worked for ran Red Hat based distributions for their server side. So I became very comfortable with the ecosystem, with the release cadence, with the community of people that are active both in Fedora, CentOS Stream, and RHEL. So even if I left Red Hat tomorrow, Fedora would still be my go-to.
Hmm. All you two in the chat room says, I feel that whenever I'm on Linux, my tolerance for issues and annoyances is way higher in general. You know what I think that is? I think that's because you acknowledge that at some point that problem is going to go away. And 1A is that if it really bothered me, I could go find the nerd on the internet and he has a GitHub or a GitLab account, and I'll reach out to him or her and I'll say, hey, this is a really frustrating problem. Can I somehow support you in doing this? And either they'll just fix it for me, they'll let me pay them to fix it for me, or they'll say, I don't have time to do it, but here's another contributor that is looking for extra work or wants to get plugged in or whatever it is, and they'll help kind of facilitate a connection. But one way or another, the problem is solvable. The issue, by comparison, when you sit down in front of a Windows computer or a MacBook, you experience the issue. There's a bone that's buried. You know how to work around it. It's great. You just wait for the next thing to come out and pray that the people in the development room at Apple value the same things you do so that they will fix the thing for you. And if they don't, then you just wait for the next one to come out and hopefully it'll be different next time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if all you two has been around desktop Linux for 10 or 15 years, you probably have a high tolerance because you're used to things not working without having to go and debug kernel line arguments and recompile drivers on the fly. And so nowadays, it struck me after the day after the upgrade, came back downstairs, fired up my Carbon. It's like, you know what? I'm definitely going all Linux today because I want to spend some time with the new upgrade. And it's like, did did I upgrade? I mean, yeah, things visually look a little bit different, but I mean, it's running just the same as it was. In-place upgrades are one of the most boring things around around Linux anymore, because it's a non-event. You run a few commands, you give it about 45 minutes, reboot your system, and now instead of running Fedora 40, you're running Fedora 41.
Richard in the chat room says, you got it for free. It's hard to be upset about a free experience. The bar for excellence doesn't change just because you didn't monetarily contribute to a project. The other thing I would tell you is that it's true, I didn't spend any money to go download the ISO and put it in and install it onto my computer. That does not mean that somebody wasn't paid for the amount of work that they put into that thing. And it's helpful feedback to them and towards the end goal of saying, hey, in the end, there ain't nobody in the Linux world that doesn't want the thing to work, right? Particularly the people that maintain those projects. So the more that we can help them understand, hey, this little file dialog pops up right at the end of all of the list of files. And so if you've got more files than you have screen real estate and scrolling becomes into play, now I can't see the file at the very bottom of the file manager. And that allows that person to move where that notification pops up. So I like the idea of, hey, we're super critical of these projects and we provide hypercritical feedback in the spirit of love and with constructive criticism. And that allows us to, again, make the thing better so that other people look over and say, geez, that Linux land really went from a bunch of geeks to being a really approachable thing for a lot of other people. That's what we want.
And one of the other things that I really appreciated about this particular release was not only was it a lot of quality of life in terms of things like drivers and the GNOME desktop, was also that now Fedora Linux is to a place where not only are individual upgrades fairly simple, fairly quality of life, like the blog announcement was probably one of the shortest ones we've had in several years.
New upgrade. Which one?
Here's right. What you get. And so one of the big things that changed in Fedora Linux 41 was actually under the covers. That was the introduction of DNF5, which is a big overhaul to the output of which is a big overhaul to the underlying package manager. But to an end user, you're not going to see anything, especially if you're using something like GNOME software. But if you're on the command line and you run DNF upgrade like every day or thereabouts, you notice that the output is a lot cleaner, that the transactions run a lot smoother, just because of the way that the underlying communication within DNF reacts. You're scratching your chin there, Noah. What do you think?
Well, where I would push back on the end user won't notice anything. Sure, today, right at upgrade time, when you go from one to the other, okay, fine, the delta is not there. But my understanding with the new DNF5 is that it requires less packages for it itself to run, meaning that we've reduced the complexity, and that's how we've gotten it to be faster and smaller and all the things that we want to see in good software engineering. If true, we ultimately arrive at a more efficient, reliable machine. So today, while all those other packages by all the various people on the internet that are making them and contributing and pushing them and doing all the things to make sure we have access to all the things, it's great. 5 years from now or 10 years from now, if you're still using that, maybe that's a little bit too far into the future, but at some point those packages start to become available or unavailable. And now your tool still works because it's got all what it needs right here in its home.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to kind of extend your point, this is laying the groundwork, not just for DNF to run faster, but DNF5 actually can replace micro DNF. So you'll see this impact in the container space or with bootc images or with the atomic distributions. But upgrading to DNF5 as part of the release wasn't the end goal. In fact, we won't see the completion of this project until Fedora 42 or 43. So the Fedora engineers are laying the groundwork for future updates. And so at some point here in the very near future, within the next year, easily, if you're using boot C or RPM OS tree, like the atomic distributions, you won't need additional tools. You'll be able to do all of that, excuse me, from DNF. So not only have we gone from reactionary to fighting fire, from fighting fires and having to recompile our drivers after an upgrade, to now we're actually thinking a year in advance, laying the groundwork, cleaning things up.
All you two in the chat room says, I remember when I'd go crazy about a GNOME 3 hot corner activating my full screen game. Today, no such issues. Even OBS recording just works. But it reinforces this idea that if you have, once we have all of the ideas out there and they're all competing, then it's time to super hone all of the ideas and dial all of the things in. And that's what you're starting to see as newer distros come out, right? Instead of, if you looked at a distro review of 10 years ago, it would look very different than what this episode looks like today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay to get more granular, to get more to where it's not, oh yeah, this is a totally different thing from this GNOME 2 that you remember. That's cool.
The one thing I was surprised was that the new Anaconda installer didn't land in this release, but I think that's very mature of the Fedora engineering team to kind of hold that back. You can actually try it out now, the new installer, but Anaconda is still the default. But likely in the next release, we'll see the new installer as the replacement. So, I mean, think about how mature this is. We went from having to basically do a fresh install almost every time because in-place upgrades never worked, to actually being able to do in-place upgrades over your lunch break because it takes less than 45 minutes, and most of that is just downloading the 1,000 packages that have new updates. But now we're also able to plan ahead the next release or two, but we're also confident enough in our software development to be able to hold something back and say it's not quite there yet.
Did you play with Miracle at all? What?
So I've got to be transparent. I've got to be honest.
Okay.
I worry about all the spins, all the different desktop environments, and I told you that I'm very basic.
Yeah. But so, I mean, I can understand if you said to me, no, I don't use any of those because I'm very basic. That would make sense. But why do you worry about all of the other spins?
Because you're talking about diluting the engineering time of people that are available. The open source community is built on passionate people that may or may not get paid to support a package, a desktop environment, or a distribution as their day job.
Here's the thing.
A lot of open source developers don't get paid to work on their passion project.
So what's the conclusion we draw from that?
That
most open source developers don't get paid for the time they put into their projects. What's the conclusion that we draw from that? The conclusion,
Dr. Chalaya, why don't you tell me?
The conclusion I draw from that is they're not doing it for money. It's not about the paycheck. It's they're passionate about the thing. And so if you have somebody that's very passionate about making tiling window managers, and that person wants to base their thing on Fedora and thus is born, I have no idea if this is actually how but that is how those things are there. So is there a dilution of engineering talent insofar as, perhaps Red Hat has a certain amount of resources to fund the Fedora project, and so with that comes you got to pull all these things in, and so some things are doable and some things are not? Absolutely, 100% agree there. However, the people that are maintaining all of this other stuff outside of it, I don't know that it really costs any engineering talent that wouldn't be there. Like if that person couldn't work on their passion project, they might just not engineer at all. Perhaps the reason they engineer that particular thing is because they're very passionate about it and has nothing to do with the pay. So I look at that and I just think to myself, I wonder if it would really cost us a whole lot to have the competition again, unless we started saying, hey, all the paid people, right? Like that's a different thing. If you're trying to accomplish a thing and then those are getting split, well, I'm working on this project. We're all working for the same company, but that guy prefers KDE, so he does all his community contributions over there, and I can see how that would get problematic. But But you're familiar with Fedora Miracle, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about tiling window manager, which I've tried from time to time. It's fun, it's exciting, but I mean, to be honest, it's not my individual taste. But I know people that swear by tiling window managers who have scripts that set up their desktop environments every time. So there's definitely a place for it, and
But
you raise a good point. That's not something I'd really considered. Was that someone who's working on a desktop environment like Miracle, or sorry, a spin like Miracle, isn't in it for the money, and they know they'll most likely never make any money doing it, but it's something that they do because they're passionate about it and they can. Um, so I hadn't considered that, honestly. That's a good point.
can I try and talk you into it?
No. 10 years ago, sure, but nowadays I like to sleep.
Fair enough.
Not to say that tiling window managers are hard, and I feel like I'm backpedaling a little bit, but it's just not for me. As Eric, the individual who is a father, a husband, a full-time employee, going back to school in January, it's just not for me.
Did you have to get that in there? So
Uh,
what you're saying is you're time constrained.
yes.
So can I make an argument for a tiling window manager from the standpoint that it is a tool that will save you time?
You'd be
Let me
hard
ask
pressed.
Let me ask the question a different way. If a tiling window manager could simplify your interaction with a computer, thereby allowing you to get the applications to occupy the screen real estate and you to interact with them with less effort and time invested on your part, is that something that you'd be open to or interested in?
You'd be hard pressed to make that sale because of ROI. Right now, I feel like my desktop layouts and my desktop interactions are fairly well optimized. I mean, especially when you factor in things like the GNOME. Gosh, I even forgot what the extension's called. The G tile, I think is the one that I use, where I can use keyboard shortcuts to say this window takes up a half the screen, this window takes up the top right corner of my screen, which is pretty much how all my windows are laid out. Um, Using G-tile and keyboard shortcuts works fine for me. So the problem with making that particular sale is the ROI. It's going to take me a very, very long time to recoup my investment, quote unquote, um, to move to a tiling window manager, trying to get up to speed and learn it, to get to where I'm at. I don't see a big enough advantage to a tiling window manager to to uh, to justify the investment of time and resources.
Do you at least acknowledge that the way that you're using your current desktop environment is mimicking the things that are appealing about a tiling window manager?
Yes, yes, I do acknowledge that.
Okay, cool. So Fedora Miracle, if you're a person that's open to tiling window managers, it's a thing.
We just know that the IT guy's just an old dog and doesn't want to learn any new tricks.
You know what'll be interesting? Just to tie both parts of our conversation together, it will be really interesting over time to see how many people leave any particular desktop environment because in the end, they wanted to use an application, they wanted it to occupy screen real estate, and they wanted to interact with it. And something got in between them and being able to do that task. And I wonder if at that time, we're not going to look back at tiling window managers and say, the nerds were onto something. There is an elegant simplicity in just present this application to me. Great. Everything else off of my screen. I'm not dealing with you. I'm dealing with this. There is an elegant simplicity in I plug my laptop in and now I have to control 6 monitors. And I want when I open Firefox for it to show up on that monitor every single time, no matter what configuration I'm using it. All you two in the chat room says, I feel I gravitate towards fixing the tiling issue with hardware running 4 displays nowadays. Exactly. So
I think that pretty much proves your point.
well, what it proves is that he has a desire to have the most simplistic way to occupy screen real estate with an application. And because it's cheaper and easier to go spend 100, 150 bucks on a display and plug it into the HDMI port, and then all of a sudden now I can drag that window and voila, I have tiled a window across a display, that's the path of least resistance, the thing we do. But I don't know. I just, the more I use computers and the more I reflect on what am I really after here? What I'm really after here is I'm a geek that wants to sit behind this amazing invention called a computer, and I want to be able to leverage it to do all the really cool things that we do. And I went from a time having to purchase software from companies and ask their blessed permission to run the thing that I paid them for on my hardware. And thanks largely to Linux and open source, I now have the ability to install that thing directly. By the way, this would be a great time to say fedoraproject.org and click on the download link, and you too can participate. I have the ability to do all of that. If we're going to have little roadblocks or little paper cuts or whatever we want to call them inside of KDE, inside of GNOME, inside of other places, perhaps a tiling window manager is the way to alleviate that. I'd say try it. Maybe you got a thing that works for you, so I get it. Not you, but them. Try it. Try it for like a week and see what you think. Get into the habit of first being very intentional with your time of like, here's the thing I'm going to sit down on my computer and I'm going to concentrate on, and then use whatever tiling window manager. Try it. Just see what you think. Just give it a shot and come back and tell me what you think.
So I kind of like where this is going, and this is very meta, not the company, the concept.
There is a meta key in tiling window managers. Yeah, it's a big thing.
And maybe Noah, you and I need to talk about this off air. But what's interesting about this episode is we had a very straightforward agenda, and you've given me a lot to think about, and this has been much more of a discussion than I was kind of expecting. I was thinking in my brain, I was thinking very much news anchors. This is what's new in GNOME. This is what's new underneath the Fedora kernel. This is what's new hardware wise. And thank you. This is probably the shortest Fedora episode ever. Right. But
with conversation comes change. So if we have conversation, then eventually I'll get you to change, and eventually we'll drop that curl link into your MacBook and you'll install Fedora.
I will say that you have a better chance of me switching to a tiling window manager than putting Fedora on my company issued MacBook.
You could put Fedora Miracle on your company issued MacBook, and you could kill two birds with one stone. Here all afternoon.
No, you're not. You got another show to do.
I'm here all afternoon.
All right. Let's have some fun. We've got a good crowd in the live chat, and we haven't had a live show for about a month. So I will put it to you this way. And Neil, if you're listening, I'll extend this challenge to you as well. My two main devices, pretty well set in stone. I don't want to change them. Don't want to mess with what's working. But if Altispeed had like an X1 Carbon or something laying around that you could deliver to Kansas City, I would try out Miracle, and Neil, I would try out Plasma for a week each and see how it goes. And, because I'm a marketing guy, make content out of it.
Richard in the chat room says, Miracle, Sway, i3, which one for tiling? So my best understanding is that i3 and Sway are the same. It's just one is for Wayland and one is for Xorg. And maybe that understanding is mistaken, but I fell into the i3 hole like, I don't know, 8 months ago, 9 months, maybe it's been over a year now. At some point, I just got fed up with, that thing doesn't open. That thing isn't a little applet, but it's taking, and it got frustrating. You'd open up a dialog to go adjust like the resolution or the display thing. And I have a 4K monitor, and here I am staring at a window, this big on the screen. I'm like, why would you do that? Why would, and so I just got to a point. I'm like, you know what? When I call for an application, I just want the application to take up a monitor. And if I don't want it to take up the monitor, then I wish to tell it how much to take up, and then I wish it to just do that. And then when I add more monitors, let me add more rules. And tiling has allowed me to do all that.
So you're running tiling right now?
Well, I'm running GNOME on my Fedora workstation, and then I've got on my work, what I would call my battle book is Arch with i3 on it right now.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Maybe that's just an oddity with i3 because I had a similar experience. Main window worked great, but anytime anything popped up or popped out or
No. My issue with the drawing thing was actually on KDE. You open the display settings on KDE, and the default window size, for some ungodly reason, is this window that is not big enough to show all of the adjustment settings inside of that dialog. And so it can be kind of frustrating. i3 has solved that. And by the way, to your point of, well, this thing is supposed to be, you can set any window title to be floating. And then so like if I launch, so right now, let's see if I can show this. So right now I have the changes for Fedora 41. If I hit my super key and launch the menu and I type Galc for my calculator and I press enter, it's going to float there in the center of the screen because that window is always set to float. I can select it and I could tile it. I could turn off floating and then it would snap. But why would I want my calculator to take up half the screen? I don't. So yeah, i3 was not the cause of that. i3 was the solution that resulted of that.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, to be fair, it's been 10, 12 years since I ran a tiling window manager, but that's just because I've been on GNOME this whole time and it's worked great. And, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Richard says, now try tiling on a touchscreen.
No, I know exactly. So, yeah. Here's the thing. This is something so I think you as a nerd need to carefully re-examine your motives for not wanting to jump on the tiling window manager, particularly if you decide that it is true of you that you don't want to invest a tremendous amount of time in this device that is the computer. You just want to show up and you want to use whatever application you need to get done that day. If that's for you, I would say reevaluate your position on tiling window managers. As far as the touchscreen thing, I am well aware of my own deficit. This is something I've got to shift on. I hate the idea. It gives me the heebie-jeebies when you're like, oh, I reach my phone all the time. And the thing that you don't have administrative access on, the thing that you don't have any control of, oh my gosh, you have no ability to choose what software runs on that device. And the person or company who does has designed the device in such a way that it requires an encryption signing key that only they have and they will not share with you. So
Richard, I think you struck a nerve there.
Well, it's not even Richard Stallman, man. It's
not Stallman, Rios from the chat.
Oh, I see. Well, but so anyway, so I am going to have to back off on the idea that touchscreens are this new fad that is going to someday, like in the end, really probably 15 years from now, as much as it will kill people like me who see the massive productivity that comes from having displays that sit at height, adjust things instead of all of the kids wrecking their necks and their I see problems in our future. That's what I'm trying to say, Eric. I see problems in our future, but I recognize that that's an important thing. And yeah, it's tiling window managers are a joke on touchscreens because they're not meant for it. It's meant to keep your hands in one consistent place on the keyboard where I type 100 and some words a minute as opposed to trying to peck 5 words a minute. It's just, I got feelings on it.
And I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a minute?
If you don't mind.
Breathing exercise. Okay, yeah. Though mobile touchscreen devices, Noah's issues with mobile touchscreen devices aside, I'm happy to say that with this release, there's actually been some huge improvements on Fedora Mobile. This wasn't something that I had a chance to dig in too deeply on, nor is it something that I've tried, but seeing it surface with Fedora Linux 41, I don't have the hardware laying around, but I feel like we should ask the community if you are using or are developing Fedora for mobile, you should definitely jump on the Fedora podcast on a future episode. So we are coming to the top of the hour. I hate to do this. I hate to break off a lively conversation, but I will admit that I came to this particular conversation woefully unprepared for the philosophical questions that Noah had. But I think this is a good thing. The Fedora podcast for the last couple of years has been very interview focused. It's been very question and answer. It's been very back and forth. We don't get into the why so much as but just trying to think through why we do things as technologists. Maybe that's something we need to dive into more. And maybe, Noah, you and I think about doing the show a little bit less interview focused, or maybe have segments where you and I can just bat ideas back and
I
forth.
think interviews are fine. I think what is most impactful to the people that use Fedora, the people that want to learn about Fedora, the people that want to get plugged into Fedora, is the conversation surrounding what those people, the movers and shakers in the community, are doing, and kind of what's coming down the pipe, so to speak. What's going to impact our playground, and what we got to do, like what things can we be excited about and go play with, and what things are like, hey, be aware. I think that would be a cool focus.
I like it. So if you have any thoughts or ideas for upcoming conversations between Noah and myself, when I'll actually come prepared for said conversation, head over to the Fedora discourse. Every episode now has a thread there where you can throw some comments. Also has links to our recordings on YouTube, the audio podcast, as well as, by the way, we are live on, or not live, we hopefully will be live, but we are on PeerTube now. The Linux Rocks community has very graciously given Fedora Podcast some space. And as of this recording, all 41 episodes are available. So tomorrow, the 41st episode, this episode will be uploaded to PeerTube. So you can catch it there, and you don't have to deal with the googliness, and you can actually just catch every episode of this podcast on PeerTube. So peertube.linuxrocks.org. No, this is what I get for going off script. .online. I'm sorry, peertube.linuxrocks.online. You can catch the Fedora podcast now. All right, so that runs us off of our planned comments for today. But Tuesday being Linux Day is not over. There's, of course, the Fedora podcast every other week. But Noah, where would you like to send folks?
AskNoahShow.com. Actually, so there's a couple different things. So AskNoahShow.com has the staple, the reliable, sitting, I don't know if you can kind of see it, but way on the other side of that room, right on the other side of the pink light, you'll see a small little box, little silver box. Not the one that says 123, that's the voltage thing. Don't worry about that. But the one under that is a little box, and that little box sends our stream worldwide, all over the place. At AskNoahShow.com, there's a little play button there, and you click on it, and then it streams my velvety tones into your ear holes. But I'm trying something new. And the new thing is...
Oh, no.
You want to install Fedora on that MacBook yet?
No.
I, too, like to live dangerously. So I'm switching over to Owncast, and it's been a really interesting thing. We originally set it up, and I was just trying to play with it to see how Owncast would work. And I thought to myself, there's no way that I'm sure if you put Owncast inside of a super powerful data center on a really nice computer with a huge pipe, and then you somehow synchronize it to other things all over the place, that you could run a streaming thing, work all the way. But in reality, like, that's why we pay CDNs, right? Or so I thought. It turns out that properly configured, you can run Owncast in a data center on a VM, no less, and you can achieve usable results to where the tens of people that listen to me all over the world can do so live by going to minddrip1.com or live.minddripmedia.com. And that the live.minddripmedia.com will take you right to the Owncast instance. Over time, we're going to try to consolidate all of the various things that are in all of the various places under one site, and that'll be minddrip1.com. So if you want the rock of reliability that has been Ask Noah Show for the past 7 years, go to asknoahshow.com, click on the little play thing. As my static HTML site has, let's be honest, it's long in the tooth. It's time to do something different. And so anyway, live.minddripmedia.com, and that will take you to the Owncast instance where the entire thing, from the very tip of this here microphone all the way through our board, our processing and the recording and And now even the streaming stuff, it's all open source. Every last little bit of it is all Linux based and open source. There ain't the Windows or macOS machine. There never will be. And it all gets recorded and produced and all the things. So
we should talk about that off the air, because you could save me a lot of money renewing my Restream account.
yes, actually, to be honest with you, just for like what you're doing with Restream, Nginx can do that. Right? Like you can send a stream to Nginx and your thing is, I just want to hit all the places. Because in your case, you're not, so we're the endpoints, are YouTube and Twitch and all the places, right? But they have their own CDN. So you don't really have to deal with the traffic part of that. And so if you rented a VM somewhere and ran and put Nginx on it, and you sent an RTSP feed to the Nginx server and just told Nginx, hey, when this thing lights up, you go ahead and fire it to that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. You could accomplish what you're accomplishing with Restream. And yes, one of those places can and should be, in my opinion, Owncast, to where we just put it on the site. And that way, Fedora has the ability to talk to you, the people who want to hear from Fedora, on Fedora's infrastructure, all powered by open source goodness.
That would be a lot better than using a third-party tool. Anyway, so that that was I think you and I are going to need a producer to keep us on track. But it was a lot of fun, great episode, and no, I really appreciate you both as a friend, a mentor, and now as a co-host. This was a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this all day, but we should probably get out of here.
I had fun too. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, how about 2 weeks from now?
Sure, I'll be here.
All right, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. I've been Eric, the IT guy Hendricks, and joining me has been Noah Chalaya. Check him out tonight at 6 p.m. Central for the Ask Noah show. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll have Carl George on from Texas Linux Fest fame. He will be giving us an update on EPEL. So the extra packages for Enterprise Linux. A lot of amazing packages in there. So we'll touch base with him and see what his project's been up to for the last couple of years. So I think that's it. Catch us on PeerTube, YouTube, audio, Twitch, all the things, and we'll see what the next episode brings us. I think Noah and I stumbled on some pretty good ideas. So feel free to join us in Matrix or on Discord. And until